Hey fam, welcome back. Tisha here, back for what I'm believing based on where this bookmarker is the final reading of Lost Boy. And I am finding myself to be sad. I really enjoyed actually hearing some additional things rather than just I left and I'm done. The fact that he has given us so much made this very enjoyable, but do not worry. I will be here on Thursday with our newest book. I'm waiting for it to arrive from Amazon. Funny thing is that someone suggested that we review the show and we're getting the book. So we'll see what comes of it. Let's begin. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button. We are on chapter 29, Most Wanted. Lost Boy with Brent W. Jeffs. Okay, my camera's trying to clean up. Y'all, okay, let me tell you what happened with my camera before I jump into this. I know y'all don't really care, but I'm gonna share it anyway. Because this is the type of stuff that I do. So I was making oatmeal, right? Don't judge me on this. I was making oatmeal. I was multitasking. I had my camera like balancing on the bowl of the oatmeal and the lens fell in the oatmeal. And it was piping hot oatmeal. So even though some of you all say you don't notice the haze, I do. And it's driving me nuts. But I'm not going to be buying another camera anytime soon because it's not worth it to me. Not yet. Maybe, when I see more of a income from this, I'll do it. But for right now, you're stuck. You're stuck with this and the Mac. Those are the two options we got. Oh boy. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into why you're really here, which isn't me and my clumsiness. It is chapter 29, Most Wanted. As 2005 turned into 2006, Warren remained underground. I think that is so jacked up that he was given the privilege of hiding for as long as he did because of all those people who protected him. Let me continue. We later learned that he dressed like a Gentile in casual clothes, adding baseball caps and wigs to complete his disguise. He traveled frequently, never staying in one place for long. He visited the capitals of all 48 contiguous states. Am I saying that right? Alexa, how do you pronounce Contiguous? Alexa, how do you pronounce Contiguous?
The word contiguous is pronounced
Oh,
as
Alexa, stop. He visited all 48 of the contiguous states, intent on performing a ritual to call down the wrath of God. At each Capitol building, he shook the dust off his feet in condemnation. According to the Bible, Jesus did this in places that rejected him. And Mormon scripture says it leaves a cursing instead of a blessing. Warren also had intimate visits with his favorite wives. Then he preached fiery sermons to the occupants of each safe house about the imminent coming of Christ and the presence of the devil in the world around them. He hectored his wives and the families with whom they lived, saying they had to repent or they would soon perish in the apocalypse. When one man he entrusted with a few wives got arrested for driving drunk, Warren reassigned this man's own wife and kids before he was able to return home. The guy came back to an empty house and had no way to find his missing family. Our lawyers, meanwhile, had contacted the attorney generals of Utah and Arizona, offering to help in the criminal prosecution of Warren. Can you believe that the man wasn't able to return to his family? He comes back home after getting arrested and finds out that the family's gone. Crazy. So they pushed the state of Utah to seek an administrator to oversee the UEP. The UEP was clearly now in default of its fiduciary duty. It wasn't protecting the members' assets from our legal attacks. In early 2005, Judge Denise Lindenberg began considering the cases. The attorney generals were worried that the church would sell off its assets to generate cash while it could before a trustee could take over. There was evidence that this was exactly what the church was doing, dismantling some equipment in preparation for sale. But another judge issued a restraining order preventing the church leadership from liquidating the trust in any way. In June 2005, the courts acted, appointing Bruce Winson, an accountant from Salt Lake City, to oversee the UEP. We had won our first victory. See, a lot of this is reminding me of things that we've seen in Big Love. So now I'm seeing the correlation here. Warren could no longer legally force the church members Warren could no longer legally force church members to leave their homes. He might still say they had to go, but the courts would not uphold his evictions. I was overjoyed. True, Warren wasn't in prison yet, but he'd lost his main source of financial power and a key point of leverage. Warren, however, was still nowhere to be found. I talked to people at the Utah Attorney General's office about filing a criminal case against him, but even with the evidence we had from Klain, Brandon, and me, prosecuting decades-old sexual abuse is extremely difficult. They wanted a much more recent victim. They want a slam dunk, my lawyer told me. Law enforcement is particularly sensitive in bringing cases against the FLDS. They want to pursue only cases they think have no chance of losing. That said, I'm disappointed they didn't bring a case, as I thought the evidence, including the corroborating evidence, was compelling. It's messed up that some of these people are allowed to continue their crimes because there are times where they don't take the case. Arizona Attorney General Terry Goddard agreed, telling the Arizona Republic after I filed my case, "Of everything that's happened, the lawsuit could be the most important development. Our biggest problem has been getting credible victims to come forward, and my understanding is this young man is extremely credible. But it wasn't up to him to file criminal charges in Utah. After failing to file charges in my case, prosecutors had a problem. No one else was willing to come forward. People who had left the church remained terrified of Warren's power, and no one in the church would do anything. We all knew that Warren was still committing sex crimes against children, most obviously marrying underage girls, but without a specific victim's testimony, they were not going to file criminal charges. At first, law enforcement officials were stuck. All their leads came up dry. Girls who had left the FLDS refused to press charges. Boys who had been abused by Warren had the same issues that my brothers and I had regarding the time that had elapsed. Boys also lacked the matrimonial proof that the girls who were forced into underage marriages had. For girls, there were ceremonies involving parental knowledge and permission that marked their initiation into sex with older men. Brower and others kept looking for more plausible cases. Finally, county investigators in Arizona convinced a young woman who'd left the FLDS to press criminal charges. She'd been forcibly married at 16, becoming the second wife of a 28-year-old man with 4 children. Arizona prosecutors planned to charge Warren as an accomplice to the rape. They would charge the young woman's husband with committing rape. The victim hoped to remain anonymous so that her family wouldn't find out and try to talk her out of prosecuting the prophet. Unfortunately, her grand jury testimony was leaked to the media, and her name rapidly became public. How does it get leaked? How does something like that get leaked? And when are we going to start charging these outlets with crimes when they do things like this? Because this is life and death for some people. And if they would look at it like that, I wonder if they would choose how they report things. Sick. As she feared, her family pressured her to drop the charges. She was afraid of losing them, and so she dropped the case and disappeared from public view. It was frustrating. Without criminal charges against Warren, not much effort would be made to capture him. A judge had ordered Warren to respond to our suits in 2004. Police chase criminals. They rarely track down those sought only in civil cases. Warren could potentially dodge our suit for years. With a trustee running the UEP, Warren did have much less power, but as long as he was a free man, I did not feel that justice was being served, because it's not. It still hasn't, if you ask me. And there was nothing I could do about that if the prosecutors wouldn't take my case. But luckily, Utah investigators then found a young woman named Alyssa Wall, who had an even worse story than the prior underage victim. Warren had forced her to marry her first cousin, whom she hated. She was just 14 at the time. She complained directly to Warren about not wanting her husband to have marital relations with her. I feel like I heard this story on the documentary called Keep Sweet on Netflix, but I could be wrong. And I remember how upset I got when I first heard this story. So I think this is the one. For months, Alyssa, too, did not want to press charges. She had heard what had happened to the other woman. She was pregnant in a new relationship and wanted to get on with her life. However, after numerous discussions, she finally agreed to prosecute. At first, she insisted on being what? Alexa, how do you pronounce Pseudonym? Pseudonym?
The pronunciation of pseudonym is pseudonym.
Oh, a pseudonym.
It's a word that means
Oh, why did I not know that that was pseudonym? See, y'all? I'm honest here. I didn't know that's how you spell it. Interesting. At first, she insisted on using a pseudonym, MJ. This made everything much more difficult. Finally, charges were filed in Washington County, Utah on April 6, 2006. Alyssa's privacy was strictly guarded. At long last, a criminal warrant was issued for Warren's arrest. Alyssa, who eventually agreed to go public, and her criminal charges Alyssa would eventually agree to go public, and her criminal charges kicked the manhunt into high gear. Since we filed our suit, Sam Brower had spent thousands of hours and traveled hundreds of thousands of miles searching for Warren. He was so outraged after talking with us that the hunt became a personal quest. He talked to apostates who gave him scraps of information gleaned from families still inside the church. He hung out in Hydel and Colorado City. He dug through boring property documents and did hundreds of tedious internet searches. At one point, he discovered an FLDS compound in Mancos, Colorado, where he suspected the prophet had spent some time. Before he could get there, a reporter accidentally alerted the owners. The journalist had been caught taking photos, and the compound was rapidly abandoned. Another time, Brower visited the El Dorado compound. He believes Warren was probably inside at the time, but he couldn't get to him. And so, for many more months, Warren remained beyond the reach of the law. Then, October 28th, 2005, Warren's brother Seth was arrested in a bizarre incident in Colorado. He was weaving between lanes on the interstate about 2 hours south of Denver. Another driver reported to police that a Ford Excursion was being driven erratically. Cops expected a typical DWI arrest. However, when they pulled Seth's vehicle over, they learned otherwise. The second man in the car was Seth's nephew, Nathaniel Steed, Allred. Allred claimed that he'd been paid by his uncle for sexual services. Apparently, it was the delivery of those services that caused Seth's concentration on his driving to slip. As I later said to Larry King, he had been caught with his pants down. The police found $142,000 in cash, some illegal drugs, $7,000 worth of prepaid credit cards, and 7 no contract untraceable cell phones, along with printouts of some of Warren's sermons and sealed envelopes addressed to Warren Jeffs or just the prophet. Seth claimed he didn't know where Warren was, but also boasted that if he did know, he wouldn't tell the police anyway. Among Warren's correspondence was a letter from the Short Creek police chief that declared both his and fellow officers' allegiance to Warren. Wow. I hope to hear any directives you have for me, it said in part. This would be invaluable evidence in our quest to end the law enforcement careers of Colorado City police who obeyed Warren rather than the law. The arrest re-energized our search, but it wasn't until May 6, 2006, that the most important break in the case came. The FBI put Warren on its 10 most wanted list. My dad and I were asked to appear on the America's Most Wanted TV show to talk about why Warren needed to be tried and convicted. There were now 2 skinny, 6-foot-plus religious fundamentalist polygamists on the FBI list: Warren and Osama bin Laden. $100,000 was offered for information leading to Warren's arrest. Jody and I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment at this time with furniture we found at a moving sale, as well as some salvage from my old place. The Most Wanted television crew had pretty much trashed our living room, moving everything around to get the shots that they needed. Jody came home from work when they were taping and was startled to see everything so out of place when I was usually so particular about keeping everything neat. I had been nervous about appearing on TV, but by this point I was getting used to it. I spoke plainly and simply about what had happened to me and some of my brothers. That was all most people needed to hear to make up their minds about Warren. Yeah, that's all it should take after all this. My father was interviewed for the program as well. America's Most Wanted includes reenactments. In this show, an actor playing Warren Jeffs is seen seizing power from his father and threatening a little girl with implications of hellfire if she tells anyone he abused her. It was not very realistic, but it got the point across. Once Warren was placed on the wanted list and the show aired, I was put under FBI protection. Wow. The things you don't know. I didn't know that. The violent history of Mormon fundamentalism, combined with the nature of the charges that I made and the link between blood atonement and the building of a temple, made them believe that I was at serious risk. I shrugged it off, telling Larry King several days later that I didn't think Warren would really send anyone after me because doing so would only intensify the search. But it was sobering to know that at one of the last services he preached, 1,000 people stood up when he asked who was willing to die for him. Yeah, buddy. These type of people, if he did all those other things, he would risk it through someone else. We've seen blood atonement play out in another book, so he would do it here too. That made me appreciate the FBI agents whose car was parked somewhere on my street. The media attention intensified. I did dozens of television and print interviews with journalists from around the world. Anderson Cooper and Larry King on CNN, Montel Williams, Fox News, Greta Van Britain's Channel 4, networking morning shows, and virtually all the Salt Lake media, as well as many others. Dan Fisher hired someone just to deal with the media when the Lost Boys became a cause. The pressure to catch Warren was also up. Sightings of the prophet were reported everywhere. Still, for almost all of the summer, all the rumors and tips didn't lead anywhere. The prophet had been underground for more than a year, and his followers were now claiming he should materialize and demantleize at will to avoid his captors. Whoa. Materialize and dematerialize at will to avoid his captors. God would protect him, they said. In his tapes or lectures, to the people, he even claimed that the 2004 tsunami that killed hundreds of thousands of people in Indonesia was God's vengeance on his persecutors. Oh boy. I mean, I guess that's all he's worried about. God is only worried about Warren, and what Warren wants. Yeah, right. It's just ugh. Chapter 30, A Prophet in Purgatory. On the evening of August 26, 2006, a Nevada State Trooper, Eddie Dutchover, was patrolling I-15, which leads out of Vegas around 9 p.m. He spotted a red Cadillac Escalade driving north. They do love their SUVs. The luxury SUV was fresh off the lot. A 2007 model, so new that it only had a temporary license plate. The rear license plate was hidden in its holder, making it unreadable. Seeing the violation, Dutchover pulled the vehicle over. The officer could see that the driver had a global positioning system and a radar detector. There were 2 passengers in the back seat, a young woman and an extremely anxious-looking man. Dutchover sensed something fishy, drug dealing perhaps. The skinny, nervous guy certainly looked as if he could be on coke or meth. That means Warren was looking rough. The trooper began questioning the driver, soon learning that his name was Isaac Steve Jeffs, not realizing that this was Warren Jeffs' brother. Dutchover became more suspicious when he discovered that the driver's license was from Utah, but the car was registered in Idaho and had a temporary Colorado plate. Oh, so it wasn't Warren that was looking like he was on meth or coke. It was his brother. Okay, gotcha. When asked his name, the man in the back seat said, "It doesn't matter." Dutchover decided to run the car and its occupants through the system. He could see that the guy in the back was practically shitting himself. The veins in his neck were visibly pulsing. He was trying to eat a salad, but not seeming to get anything down. Dutchover was frustrated to find the central computer down. He wasn't sure what to do. He could let the driver and his shady-looking passenger go. It was only a minor violation after all, but he felt like there was something else going on. It is so important to pay attention to the way that your body will alert you to things, to the energy in a room, to stuff like that, because it's really trying to save you in some instances or to make you aware. He asked for permission to search for drugs and weapons and called for backup. Soon, the police found some $60,000 in cash, more than a dozen cell phones, 2 iPods, and many letters to the president and WSJ. There were 3 wigs, blonde, black, and brunette, 4 laptops, a briefcase holding a Bible, the Book of Mormon, and some other religious books. Lists of addresses and phone numbers. The officers called the FBI. An agent arrived and again asked the man in the back, "What's your name?" He looked up in resignation and said, "Warren Steve Jeffs." The rogue prophet, the man who had done so much harm to me and my family, had finally been captured. The preacher who had banned the color red had been caught in a big red car. Isn't that something? He banned red and you get caught in a red car. The man who had made women wear long underwear under long pants under dresses in Utah's heat and prohibited shorts and short sleeves and t-shirts was wearing baggy army green shorts and a t-shirt. The woman with him was one of his favorite wives, 31-year-old Naomi, a daughter of Merrill Jessup's, the man who runs the YFZ Ranch. She was scantily dressed too, at least for church members. My father called to tell me the news. At first, I didn't believe it because there had been so many unconfirmed rumors. But when I called my lawyers, they said the same thing. And when I saw Warren on TV in handcuffs, I realized he had finally been captured. And it felt great. Now Warren would know what it was like to be powerless. I knew he was a monster, but now the world would know as well. With Warren in jail, his reign of fear would end. I admit I went out and got drunk that night with a friend, and I enjoyed it too. By now, it was clear to me how Warren had turned the FLDS from a strange religion into a dangerous cult. The difference is this. Whereas a religion may have weird beliefs and practices, a dangerous cult uses a combination of seemingly innocent teachings and techniques to control people. It usually has a charismatic leader who is seen as the source of all wisdom and salvation. Such groups can actually push normal people to do bizarre things that they would never dream of doing on their own, by themselves. None of the techniques that Warren used to control church members are particularly powerful. In isolation, they wouldn't spur parents to abandon their spouses or children or leave their sons on the side of the highway, but taken together, cult techniques can genuinely reduce people's abilities to make healthy choices, keeping members isolated from outside influences, keeping them too busy to think, preaching fear and terror. Everything starts to add up. Getting family members to spy on one another, using police to enforce religious rulings, continually stressing that outsiders are evil. This pushes things further. When your own people's property, control their children's education, and preach that their only road to salvation comes through obedience to you, you reduce their independence further. On top of that, if you place young girls into marriages with older men and ensure that they have many children quickly, you create whole families that can be manipulated. And to this fact, that the people involved have overwhelmingly lived in an underground illegal lifestyle for generations and generations without knowing much about other ways of life, and have been subjected to endless hours of repetitive hypnotic preaching with an emphasis on conformity, and you have a recipe for disaster. The FLDS has always taught obedience and respect for the prophet, but when it shifted to one-man rule, it lost any checks on the prophet's power. When grandfather took over, he was given absolute control over church members' lives. Before Uncle Roy died, Rulon seemed to have genuinely believed the prophet would live forever. As far as I can tell, he didn't plot to take over the way his son did. When Uncle Roy passed, Rulon couldn't believe that his leader had not lived to see the end of times with him. He took charge, but grandfather was an accountant and was far more comfortable with numbers and rules than with people. When Rulon became prophet, he was also already weak and vulnerable to his ambitious wife, Marilyn, and her protege, Warren. Warren had grown up the favorite child of a favorite wife with no experience other than that privilege and with little real contact with the outside world. He had been corrupted by seeking power and being shielded from all consequences long before he ever got it. That's true, because if you're known to have been abusive towards others and to been peeking on people and all those things and nothing happened, what are you being taught? That it's okay, that you'll be protected. I don't know what made him into a pervert, but many, perhaps most people like him, were abused themselves at some point. As an abuser survivor, I myself can't understand how anyone could take the experience that I had and want to inflict it on someone else. I will never understand that either. But I do know that it happens. I don't think someone like Warren just wakes up one day and decides to do it. It has to come from somewhere. As I look back, it seems like all his preaching about never being naked and always covering all exposed skin and avoiding the opposite sex, even making sure you are quick about changing diapers, must have been about his own struggles with his desires and his lack of control over them. That's exactly what it was about, because he's a perv. When such a man becomes the leader of a group trained to be obedient, that group can be shaped by his pathology, and the FLDS was. The closed patriarchal leadership that he helped to shape enabled him to continue his abuse with impunity. I don't know if polygamy always produces abuse of women and children, but from my experience, it frequently does. I don't think it always does, but I do think that it's a much higher number than is even reported. I do. Because if you think about it, if there's abuses in monogamy to the level that there are, imagine what is done in polygamy that they deem as not abusive. I think it's fair to say that it has always had the potential to do so in any closed system that has leadership with unchecked power. When women are seen as second class citizens, I don't think polygamy can be anything but abusive. With Warren in jail, held in the part named Purgatory Penitentiary, the church could change. I know from being a lost boy how hard it is to go from being so rule bound and constricted to the wild freedom of life outside. I know how scary it is and how tempting it is to go back and just let someone else make all the decisions. But I also know how much better it can be to live as your own person, even though the transition can be terrifying. I hope that with Warren locked up, my relatives and friends who are still in the church might glimpse freedom and move toward it. Chapter 31, New Life. Jody has been in labor for 24 hours when the doctors finally decided to do a C-section. I was with her, holding her hand, trying to help but feeling pretty helpless. She was racked with pain, but her labor hadn't progressed. We had waited 3 years after getting married before she convinced me that we were ready to have a child. I had wanted to own a house, have a good job, and feel secure in our relationship first. Most of all, I wanted to be sure that I'd be ready to be a good father. Dad hadn't learned about his PTSD until most of his children were grown. I wanted to make sure I was ready to face the challenge of raising a child with mine. When we started trying, I decided I was as ready as I could ever be. After suffering a late miscarriage, Jody had gotten pregnant and made it through those scary early months. From her sonogram, we learned that she was carrying a girl. We looked at a bunch of baby name books and decided to name her Haley. Now, I was in the operating room, masked and gloved, as the surgeon began to cut Jody open. It was surreal. I watched in awe as I saw him pull my daughter out. She started crying right away with the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. The nurses took Haley away to clean her off and weigh her. Then they handed her to me. She weighed nearly 9 pounds and was 22 inches long. It was no surprise that Jody had needed a C-section. Ooh, that was a big baby. My cousin's baby was 10'3", and he was 10'3" at 36 weeks. So I can only imagine if she did the whole 40. Ugh. Haley was perfect. My life flashed in front of my eyes as I held her, thinking about what had brought me to this moment. Tears welled up. I felt proud and in awe of my wife and happy and terrified. I couldn't get over the beauty of Haley's pink, pearl-like toes and tiny, curving fingers. I was completely overwhelmed. I suddenly realized I was responsible for this little person forever. I felt a surge of love like nothing I'd ever experienced. I knew I would do anything to protect her, to ensure no harm ever came to her. I was also hit by a wave of sadness that 2 of my brothers would never get to share my joy. A year earlier, I had a 4 a.m. phone call that was like a flash of Clayton's death. This time it was Dave's wife on the phone crying. Oh man, not another one. She found Dave's body on the couch. He had overdosed on methadone, some other painkillers, and alcohol. Big D. The center of our family was gone. Jody and I had rushed over. As with Clayton, I just couldn't believe that my brother was dead. But when I saw paramedics outside, I knew. We tried to console Dave's wife and began calling my brothers and sisters. We'll never know if he meant to kill himself or it was just a tragic mistake. The night before, Dave and his wife and Jody and I had had dinner with my parents. It seemed like a perfectly ordinary dinner, but Dave did make a strange remark about wanting to have bagpipes play at his funeral. When we said goodbye that night, he seemed to hug everyone a bit longer and tighter and say, "I love you," with a bit more intensity than usual. I don't know if he said that because he was planning to commit suicide or because he had some sense that this time was near. All I know is that I miss him and Clayton and so wish that they could have been there to greet Haley. In the waiting room, Mom and Dad were anxious to meet their new grandchild. My sister Linda and Jody's mom and stepfather were there too. After Jody held Haley and we took a picture, the nurses let me carry her out through the swinging doors of the operating room to greet the waiting grandparents. I was so proud. I wasn't lost anymore. I knew exactly what my purpose was now. I had stood up to Warren and had helped bring him to justice. Though I wish it had been my case that was heading to trial and that would soon end in his conviction, I knew that the Lost Boys and I had begun the process that would ultimately take him down. It was our lawsuits that had taken away control of the 110 million UEP. Our suits also kick-started the process of decertifying the Colorado City and Hydale police, stopping them from acting as Warren's enforcers and making it easier for abused women or children to leave. We settled with the trust, each receiving a 3-acre plot of undeveloped land near Colorado City, and established a $250,000 Lost Boys Assistant Education Fund to help boys who had left or would leave to get on their feet and continue their schooling. I felt good about that. Just goes to show you again, it wasn't about the money, because they didn't get any. They got some land that they still would have to use money for it to build on if they so choose. Shortly before Haley was born, Warren apparently confessed to being a sex offender during a prison visit with his brother. In prison, people like Warren who are charged with sex crimes against children are seen as the lowest of the low. They are held in solitary confinement for their own protection, as they are targeted for an assault. Warren began fasting in his 23 hours of daily solitude and spent so much time on his knees praying that he developed sores. Already thin, he lost 20 pounds and became skeletal and shaky. During a videotaped prison visit in January 2007, he told his brother that he was a wicked man. He confessed that he had molested one of his sisters and a daughter. As a result, he said, he really hadn't held the priesthood keys at all since he was 20. I am not a prophet, he said. I never was the prophet, and I have been deceived by the powers of evil. Here's my question. He's still not admitting things because he didn't say anything about all the other people that he's done things to, all the other children that he's done things to. So he gets no points for saying that little bit. I halfway feel like he said that so he could be in solitary confinement. Who knows? He said that God had visited him in his cell to test and detect me, and he saw I would rather defy him than obey him because of the weakness of my flesh. I yearned for everyone's forgiveness for my selfish way of life in deceiving the elect, breaking the new and everlasting covenant, and being the most wicked man on the face of the earth. Several days after this confession, he tried to hang himself. He was taken to the hospital, given a psychiatric examination, and returned to prison. 2 days later, he began throwing himself at the wall, saying he was trying to achieve blood atonement. All he got were bruises. It's not funny, but like, sir, come on now. I don't feel sorry for you, like, at all. Oh, goodness. He told his brother that he wanted the word of his failure as a prophet spread even to the apostates and Gentiles. At a court hearing, he held up a piece of paper that said, I am not the prophet. And with the criminal case underway, it seemed clear that Warren would probably never leave prison alive. Although he hadn't confessed to all of his crimes, I felt that as long as he was locked up, justice had been done. Looking at my new baby, I knew I faced lots of sleepless nights and had lots to learn. I felt a rush of compassion for my parents, thinking about all they had to juggle with so many children and about how hard life had been in the church. I was glad I had only one wife and child to worry about. I still don't know how my parents got through it. But I was also glad that Haley would grow up surrounded by our family. True, it was more complicated than most, but that wasn't what mattered. There were so many important things that they had taught me that I wanted to share with her. Both Mom and Dad looked so proud as I came through those doors. With the love I felt at that moment, we could face anything together. Y'all, epilogue. He did a good job. Epilogue. Warren Jeffs. On November 7th, 2007, Warren Jeffs was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 5 years to life after being convicted of 2 counts of being an accomplice to the R of Alyssa Wall. That means he will serve at least 10 years in prison on those charges alone. He is currently facing additional charges of sexual conduct with a minor and incest in Arizona, and may also face similar charges in Texas in retaliation to his own marriages to girls aged 12 and 14. FLDS in Texas. On April 3rd, 2008, Texas officials raided the Yearning for Zion Ranch, the FLDS compound in El Dorado, where Warren had ordered a temple built. Based on the information received in a telephone cry for help, which now appears to have been a hoax, they removed over 400 children on suspicion of child abuse and underage marriage. The Texas child welfare officials flew me in so that I could testify about the sexual abuse in the FLDS, but they decided instead to have me brief experts who would be working with FLDS children. Although most of the children have now been returned to their parents, and the media has portrayed the raid as an overreaction by child welfare officials, 12 people have been indicted so far from being involved in forced underage marriages. So there is some truth to it. FLDS in Colorado City, Hidell. With Warren in prison, life in Colorado City and Hidell has improved. Although it is still very close society, there's much more contact between church members and relatives who have left, including Lost Boys. Laughter, music, books, and dogs have returned, and people no longer face the threat of having their families and homes reassigned. Warren's most fervent followers now live at the YFZ Ranch in Texas. So you mean to tell me he admitted that he is all these things and y'all are still following him? And they are at highest risk for child abuse and future underage marriages because their world is still so limited. The future of the FLDS as a whole is still murky. A new leader could unify the people in either positive or negative ways. The group could splinter or attrition could set in, leading to a slow decay. Lost Boys. My brothers and I who were Lost Boys illustrate many of the risks faced by young men who leave the church, who now number in the hundreds. New boys also continue to leave. In our case, 6 of us left the church as teenagers to live on our own. We were luckier than some in that we were not always completely cut off emotionally from both of our parents, but like others, we did not have their financial support or close guidance when we left. Only one of us had completed high school before leaving, and that was at Alta Academy. While almost everyone eventually got GEDs or finished high school later, one of us, Brandon, has gone to college. Many of us have struggled with alcohol and other drug problems. 2 of my brothers became addicted to heroin and similar drugs. One had a period of methamphetamine addiction, and I certainly smoked more than my fair share of marijuana. Many of us have suffered depression and have some symptoms or meet the full criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. And of course, I have lost 2 brothers, Clayne and David, whom I still miss every day. Although we do not know whether David's overdose was intentional, his action was clearly influenced by what happened to him in the church and the way he left it. Without therapy and support of the people around me, I might have joined them. The rest of us have now managed to build lives for ourselves. I am married and chasing Haley as she becomes a toddler, and I am working for Ultradent. My brothers are mostly married or engaged, and everyone is working. But as it's true in our case, the level of severe drug and mental health problems among Lost Boys is much, much higher than for other young men of the same age. For those interested in learning more and helping the Lost Boys, this is contact information for the Diversity Foundation. It's Shannon Pierce, Director, 505 West 10200 South Jordan, Utah 84095. The office number is 801-553-4556. The fax number is 801-553-4600. Web address http://www.smileforddiversity.org with a backslash behind it. Oh boy, good book. Acknowledgement. Brent Jeffs. I would like to first of all wholeheartedly thank my wife Jody for all the support she has given me throughout all of this. Secondly, I want to thank my mom and dad for their love and for always believing in me. In addition, I thank all of my brothers and sisters, but especially my brother Brandon, whom I admire in so many ways for his strength and determination. Without Dr. Bruce Perry, this book would have never been possible. I also thank our agent, Andrew Stewart, and editors Phyllis Grand and Jackie Montalvo, Montalvo, all of whom truly enhanced our work in many ways. Dr. Dan Fisher and Shannon Price and the Diversity Foundation provided important support, as did my attorney, Greg Houle, and of course, last but not least, my awesome, talented, and gifted writer, Maya Salovich. This is what Maya Salovich has to say. Much thanks to Peter McDermott for everything, as always. Echoing thanks to Diversity and our incredible agent, Andrew Stewart, and superb editors, Phyllis Grant and Jack. Many thanks to Lisa Ray Coleman, my friend and transcriber. Special thanks to Alyssa Court for her friendship and illumination, and to the Matildas, especially Deborah Siegel and Rachel Lehman Haupart, Haupt. I said that wrong. And particularly gratitude to Bruce Perry for introducing me to Brent. Brent, it has been a joy and an honor to work with you and your family, and I thank you all for your dedication, courage, and kindness in sharing your story. And that is how it ends. Y'all, it's over. I don't know why I get sad at the end of some of these books. To my knowledge, from what I looked up on his Facebook page, he is still with his wife. He is still a monogamous. He has no intentions on being anything but. And his daughter and his wife are doing great. He has a most recent picture of 2024 up there. So if I remember to, I'll provide the link to his Facebook in the comment section. Thank you guys so much. You know, as always, we rate the book. So on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, how many are you giving them? I am giving this, I gave the last one. Did I give the last one a 5? If I gave the last one a 5, this one is a 5 too. I'm giving this a 5 because he took this to a place where others haven't, and he gave us so much more in the after he left. And I appreciated that. But you all tell me what you're rating it. I'll see you all soon. Until next time.